Imagine a world without oil. No cars, no planes, no plastic, no modern medicine, no military jets soaring through the sky. Now imagine a world without silver. No solar panels, no smartphones, no medical imaging, no guidance systems for missiles. Now imagine those two things becoming the secret drivers behind every major war you have ever heard of. What if I told you that the battles you read about in history books, the conflicts you see on the news, and the economic collapses that wipe out entire generations of wealth are all connected by a hidden thread that almost nobody ever talks about? That thread is not just oil, and it is not just silver. It is the strange, invisible dance between the two. A dance that has shaped empires, destroyed currencies, and decided the fate of billions of people without them ever knowing why. And today, on Macro Truth, we are going to pull that thread until the whole tapestry unravels in front of your eyes. Before we go any further, if you are someone who wants to understand the real forces that move money, power, and history, then you need to hit that like button and subscribe to this channel right now. Seriously. Do not wait until the end, because what you are about to hear is not opinion, it is not speculation, it is the kind of hidden mechanism that only a handful of insiders ever piece together. And if you stay with me for the next 20 minutes, you will never look at war, oil, or silver the same way again. Let us start with the obvious one first, oil. Everyone knows oil is strategic, but the way most people think about oil and war is far too simple. They imagine that countries fight to control oil fields, and that is true to some extent. But the real connection is much deeper and much more disturbing. Oil does not just fuel tanks and ships. It fuels the entire global financial system. Every dollar bill in your pocket, every digital transaction you make, every bond issued by the United States Treasury, all of it is backed by an invisible contract written in oil. You see, in the early 1970s, the United States made a deal with Saudi Arabia. The deal was simple. The Saudis would sell their oil exclusively in US dollars, and in return, the US would protect the Saudi regime. That deal created what economists call the Petrodollar system. Suddenly, every country that needed oil had to earn or borrow US dollars to buy it. And that created an infinite demand for dollars, which allowed the United States to run massive trade deficits, print money at will, and build the most powerful military the world has ever seen. But here's the part nobody explains. That system does not just run on oil. It runs on the fear of not having oil. And the only way to keep that fear alive is to make sure that oil always feels scarce, always feels contested, always feels like something worth going to war over. Now, let us bring silver into the picture. Most people think of silver as just a cheaper version of gold, a shiny metal for coins or jewelry. But in reality, silver is the most critical industrial metal on the planet. It is the best conductor of electricity of any element. It is antibacterial. It is incredibly reflective. And without it, modern warfare would grind to a halt in a matter of days. Every precision-guided missile, every drone, every radar system, every encrypted communication device, all of them rely on silver. A single Tomahawk missile contains about 50 ounces of silver. A single F-35 fighter jet contains over 400 ounces of silver. And here's the kicker. Silver is being consumed at a rate that far exceeds its mining output every single year. Unlike gold, which mostly sits in vaults, silver gets used up in industrial applications, electronics, solar panels, and yes, weapons. And once it is used, it is very difficult to recycle. So we are literally burning through the world's above-ground supply of silver year after year, while the demand for it, especially for military purposes, is exploding. Now connect the dots. Oil and silver are both critical to modern warfare, but they are also both critical to modern civilian life, and that creates an impossible tension. When a war breaks out, oil prices spike, which causes inflation, which causes central banks to raise interest rates, which crashes the stock market, which makes people poor. But at the same time, a war also consumes massive amounts of silver, which drives up the price of silver, which makes the people who hold physical silver richer. And here is the hidden connection that nobody ever explains. The same people who benefit from high oil prices, the big oil companies, the petrostates, the military-industrial complex, are often the same people who benefit from high silver prices. And they have every incentive to keep the world just unstable enough to keep both prices elevated, but not so unstable that the system collapses entirely. Let me give you a specific historical example that will blow your mind. In 1973, the Yom Kippur War broke out between Israel and a coalition of Arab states. The United States supported Israel. The Arab members of OPEC responded with an oil embargo against the US and its allies. Oil prices quadrupled almost overnight. Gas lines stretched for miles. The US economy fell into a deep recession. But at the same time, silver prices began to rise. Investors, terrified of inflation and currency devaluation, started piling into precious metals. And one of those investors was a man named Nelson Bunker Hunt, one of the richest men in the world at the time, heir to the Hunt oil fortune. He understood the connection that nobody else saw. He knew that oil shocks would create inflation, which would drive up silver, and he also knew that his family's oil business would profit from higher prices. So he started buying silver, not just a little bit, but more than half of the world's above-ground supply. By 1980, he had driven the price of silver from less than $2 an ounce to nearly $50 an ounce. He almost broke the global financial system. And what caused all of that? A war over oil. But the profits came from silver. Now, fast forward to today. We have ongoing conflicts in Ukraine, in the Middle East, in parts of Africa. Oil prices have been volatile, bouncing between $70 and $120 a barrel. And silver, which most investors ignore, has been quietly climbing. But the mainstream financial media never tells you why. They will tell you about supply and demand, about industrial production, about central bank policies. They will not tell you that every time a missile is launched, every time a tank rolls across a border, every time a pipeline is sabotaged, the invisible hand of the market is moving money from your pocket into the pockets of a very small group of people who understand this connection. And here is the part that should make you angry. You are not supposed to understand it. The system is designed to keep you confused, to keep you focused on the headlines, the political drama, the culture wars, while the real game happens quietly in the background. Let me break down exactly how the game works. Step 1. Create or exploit a geopolitical crisis that threatens oil supply. This could be a real war, a terrorist attack, a revolution, or even just the threat of one. Step 2. Watch as oil prices spike and inflation fears spread. Step 3. Central banks respond by printing more money or raising interest rates, both of which create uncertainty in traditional financial markets. Step 4. As investors panic, smart money flows into hard assets, especially silver, because silver is both a monetary metal and an industrial metal. Step 5. The same people who own the oil fields, the pipelines, the defense contracts, also own massive stockpiles of silver. They profit on both sides of the trade. They win when oil goes up, and they win when silver goes up. And the ordinary person? They pay more at the pump, their savings lose value to inflation. Their retirement accounts get hammered by market volatility. And then they are told to blame the president, or the other political party, or some foreign enemy. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. This sounds like a conspiracy theory, and I get it. But here's the thing. A conspiracy theory is an explanation that relies on secret, shadowy groups with unlimited power. What I am describing is not a conspiracy. It is a convergence of incentives. The oil industry does not need to meet in secret rooms to decide to start wars. They just need to fund think tanks, sponsor politicians, and control the flow of information. The military-industrial complex does not need to plot coups. They just need to lobby for higher defense budgets and sell weapons to both sides of a conflict. In the silver market, it is so small compared to gold or stocks that a handful of billionaires can move the price dramatically just by placing a few large orders. You do not need a conspiracy when the system itself is wired to reward certain behaviors. But let me take this one step further, because the hidden connection between war, oil, and silver is actually a triangle, not a line. The third point of that triangle is the US dollar. Remember the petrodollar system I mentioned earlier? That system is under threat right now. China, Russia, Iran, and other countries are increasingly trading oil in currencies other than the dollar. They call it de-dollarization. If that trend accelerates, the demand for US dollars could collapse. The Federal Reserve would not be able to print money without causing hyperinflation. The US military, which costs nearly $1 trillion a year, would become unaffordable. And that is where silver comes back in. Historically, whenever a reserve currency collapses, people turn to precious metals. But gold is too expensive for everyday transactions. Silver, on the other hand, is affordable enough to be used for small purchases, but rare enough to hold value. In other words, silver is the backup currency. It is the insurance policy against the collapse of the petrodollar. And the people who know this have been accumulating silver for years, quietly, steadily, while telling the public that silver is just a boring industrial metal. Let me give you a more recent example. In 2022, when Russia invaded Ukraine, the immediate reaction in financial markets was predictable. Stocks dropped, oil spiked, and the price of gold and silver initially jumped. But then something strange happened. The US and its allies froze hundreds of billions of dollars of Russian central bank assets. They cut Russia off from the SWIFT payment system. They showed the entire world that any country holding dollars or euros could have those assets confiscated at any moment for political reasons. That sent a shockwave through central banks in China, India, Saudi Arabia, and Brazil. Suddenly, everyone realized that the petrodollar system is not just an economic arrangement. It is a weapon. And if you are holding dollars, you are holding a weapon that can be turned against you. So what did those central banks start buying? Gold, yes, but also silver, because silver is more liquid, easier to transport, and harder to track than gold. The Silver Institute reported that global silver investment demand rose by nearly 30% in the year following the invasion. Mainstream media called it a hedge against inflation. And that is true, but it is only half the truth. The other half is that sophisticated investors are preparing for a world where the oil dollar system breaks apart and where silver becomes the new monetary anchor. Now, I want to talk about something even darker. The hidden connection between war, oil, and silver also explains why certain conflicts never seem to end. Take the Middle East. For decades, the United States has maintained a massive military presence in the region, ostensibly to protect Israel and maintain stability. But look at who really benefits. American oil companies have secured lucrative contracts in Iraq, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and the UAE. American defense contractors like Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, and General Dynamics sell billions of dollars of weapons to both the U.S. allies and their enemies. And the silver market? The constant low level of conflict keeps inflation expectations elevated, which keeps silver prices supported. If the Middle East ever achieved lasting peace, oil prices would likely fall, inflation would moderate, and the demand for silver as a safe haven would drop. Peace is bad for business. I'm not saying that wars are started intentionally to profit from silver, but I am saying that the system has built-in mechanisms that make war profitable for certain people, and those people have every reason to keep the system running the way it is. Let me bring this closer to home for the average American viewer. How does this affect your daily life? Every time you fill up your gas tank, a portion of that money eventually flows into the pockets of oil companies, which then flows into political campaigns, which then flow into foreign policy decisions that lead to more military interventions, which then drive up the price of silver, which then makes the holdings of wealthy silver investors even wealthier. You are essentially paying a hidden tax every time you drive to work, and that tax is then used to fund the very system that makes your gasoline more expensive. It is a closed loop, a perfect machine for transferring wealth from the middle class to the top 0.1%. And the only way to break out of that loop is to understand it, to see the connection, to stop being a passive victim of the system and start being an active participant. So what can you actually do with this information? First, you can stop being surprised when oil prices spike and the stock market crashes. You can stop being manipulated by fear-based headlines. You can recognize that geopolitical tensions are not random acts of fate, but predictable outcomes of a system that rewards conflict. Second, you can consider owning physical silver. Not paper silver, not an ETF, not a mining stock, but actual physical silver coins and bars in your own possession. Because if the petrodollar system ever does break down, and if hyperinflation ever does hit, your digital dollars will become worthless overnight. But an ounce of silver will still be an ounce of silver, and it will still be needed for electronics, for medicine, and yes, for weapons. Third, you can demand transparency. Ask your elected representatives why the United States is still entangled in endless wars. Ask why the military budget keeps growing while schools and hospitals are underfunded. Ask why the Federal Reserve keeps printing money while claiming to fight inflation. You will not get honest answers, but the act of asking changes the conversation. It plants seeds. Now, here's the most important part of this entire video. The hidden connection between war, oil, and silver is not a secret because it is complicated. It is a secret because it is uncomfortable. It is easier to believe that wars are fought for freedom, for democracy, for human rights. It is easier to believe that oil prices go up because of supply and demand, and that silver is just a commodity like any other. But the truth is messier. The truth is that the global economy runs on violence, and that violence is monetized in ways that most people cannot see. The truth is that you're living through one of the greatest transfers of wealth in human history, from the many to the few, and the mechanism of that transfer is the combination of war, oil, and the metals that make war possible. I want you to pause for a second and think about the last time you heard any major news network explain the connection between a conflict in the Middle East and the price of silver. You never have, because that connection is not profitable for them to explain. Their advertisers include oil companies, defense contractors, and financial institutions that benefit from the status quo. Their owners are billionaires who have their own silver holdings. The game is rigged, but knowing that the game is rigged is the first step to winning it. Before we wrap up, I need to ask you for something. If this video has opened your eyes, if you now see the world a little differently than you did 20 minutes ago, then do not keep it to yourself. Share this video, post it on social media, send it to a friend who is worried about inflation or a family member who thinks the stock market is the only path to wealth. Leave a comment below. Tell me what you think. Tell me if you have noticed this connection before. Tell me if you have any questions. Because the only way to break the silence around these hidden connections is to make them visible. And every share, every comment, every like makes this information harder to ignore. And if you have not already subscribed to Macro Truth, what are you waiting for? Every week, we pull back the curtain on another hidden force that shapes your life. We do not do clickbait. We do not do hype. We do the research, we connect the dots, and we give you the truth, even when it is ugly. So hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell, and become part of a community that refuses to be fooled. To sum it all up, war, oil, and silver are not separate things. They are three sides of the same triangle. War creates scarcity of oil. Scarcity of oil creates inflation. Inflation drives people to silver, and silver funds the next war. It is a cycle that has repeated itself for decades, and it will keep repeating until enough people understand it and demand change. You cannot stop the cycle by voting for a different politician. You cannot stop it by buying a different car or recycling your cans. You can only stop it by seeing it for what it is, and then positioning yourself, your family, and your community to survive and thrive when the cycle eventually breaks. Because cycles always break. The petrodollar will not last forever. The endless wars will eventually end, either because the money runs out or because the people run out of patience. And when that happens, the price of silver will be one of the first signals. Watch it, study it, understand it, and whatever you do, do not let them keep you in the dark. Thank you for watching Macro Truth. Stay curious, stay skeptical, and I will see you in the next video.